Well, President Obama, he's had quite a day, hasn't he? He's decided to commit an ultimate provocation against Russia, sanctioning them, throwing 35 of their diplomats out of the country. We saw Dmitry Medvedev and his staff take to the Russian embassy in the UK, basically calling him a lame duck. It looks like Putin has responded himself, calling this, quote, kitchen diplomacy. I can't make this up. I found this on Vox, and it talks about how President Obama, he's taking these unprecedented steps to punish Russia for these cyber attacks we're seeing. Now, of course, U.S. intel agencies, they believe, and a couple of them, it's my belief that there are only a few rogue agents, this past year that Russia has mounted this attack on the integrity of the American electoral process. So what are we going to do? We're going to begin sanctioning and targeting like we've never targeted before, including throwing 35 of their people out of the country. Now, of course, Putin has responded to this, and he's saying, look, just because you expel our people doesn't mean we're going to expel your people. He responds, he says, look, we're not expelling anyone from Russia. We're just going to hold tight here, and we refuse to sink to your kitchen diplomacy. Now, I had to ask, what was kitchen diplomacy? I hadn't heard that expression before, and Daria, one of our lovely, we can't do without kind of people around here, explained to me that it's like a man and a wife bickering in the kitchen. So Russia's saying they're not going to stoop to that level. Thank God for that they're going to hold tight. We have an article, it's up on our website, written by Steve Watson, and it talks about how Trump and Reince Priebus is saying, we don't want World War anywhere. You know, Trump, he gave a statement from West Palm Beach about the Russian hacking, and he said, look, who knows what really happened? We don't have any idea. They're not releasing any information. And in this computer age, there's a lot of really muffled things. But here's what we do know. We're not interested in going to war all over the place. That's what we do know. And of course, he addresses the fact that Obama is sanctioning Russia, and the administration, it's spending its last hours, its last few precious hours in office trying to kick Russia in the teeth on the way out, if you can believe this. Now, we saw this in 2015 in mass, where they were sanctioning, we were forcing our Western allies, France, for example, not to build those Mistral-class warships they'd agreed to build for Russia. We were pressuring the West, the UK specifically, to make sure that Russian diplomats and people in the Russian government, their kids were kicked out of private schools, and we made a lot of them persona non grata because of the Ukraine and Crimea. But this, we have no evidence of any hacking, and yet our president, he has to look strong and tough in these last final hours instead of playing golf, which is my opinion. That's where he belongs, frankly, on the golf course, not kicking Russia in the teeth on the way out. Now, we know that President Obama, the unprecedented amount of red tape that he's throwing up there right before Trump gets in. This article, surprisingly, comes from The Hill, and that's sort of an internal beltway kind of paper for all the wonks on Capitol Hill to read. I found this article particularly amusing, and it talks about how President Obama is taking a number of unilateral actions in his last tenure, his last days of tenure, to appear to be boxing in President-elect Donald Trump. Now, all of this red tape, of course, we discussed the sanctions of Russian entities. We've also discussed this permanent ban on oil and gas drilling. He's doing a lot of these actions. Some of them are costing billions of dollars by the time they're all finished. And also this Western land development, he's scrapping the last vestiges of a registration system largely targeted at Muslim migrants, which is what Trump talked about. Obama is putting measures in place to make sure that there's so much red tape, that there's so many regulations to undo. And I was listening to the business aspect, the business regulations in particular. Carl Icahn, you know, there's been a lot of crap thrown at Carl Icahn. He's not the right choice. He is the right choice. You know what? I'm of the belief that he is the man for the job to do this, because we need somebody who understands what these regulations do to businesses and can undo them. As somebody who comes from two parents with small businesses myself, I understand the burden and the implication of these ridiculous regulations on our American system, what they're doing to the small business owner in this country. They're tying up hands. And you know what? We heard President Trump, and I don't mean to get off topic here, but it's very important to me as a citizen living in this country who hates paying a federal tax every year because I don't have adequate health insurance. This Obamacare crap, 8,000 pages in length. Most people didn't even read it before they signed it up on the Hill. And of course, we heard Nancy Pelosi say, you know what? You got to pass it before you know what's in it. Well, now we know what's in it, folks. And thank God that Trump is on the way to dismantling Obamacare as he promised he would do. And I have some faith in that promise. Now, we've seen a mass wave of populism all across the globe. We saw it in Italy with Pepe Grillo leading the referendum to tear down the current prime minister. We've seen it in France with Marine Le Pen coming to the National Front, if you will. That's the name of her party. And she literally is coming to the National Front as people are gaining momentum against these globalist rogue policies. We've seen it here in the States with Trump and, of course, with Brexit and Nigel Farage. Now, it looks like some of the Italian thugs that cannot stand the populism movement, this article, it's up on Breitbart. It talks about the fake news. and how they're causing populism is causing, the censorship aspect. The elites are not trusting anything. And Italy specifically, the antitrust chief, we've got truth czars here in this country. They've got chiefs. They want to make sure that public agencies are working to remove the fake news from anything. We're seeing these fines imposed in Italy as well. We saw it in Germany, Merkel talking to Zuckerberg herself and making sure that Facebook knows that for every fake news post left up every day, it's going to be 500,000 euros. Looks like Italy, because of the referendum, some of the people in power, they cannot stand it either. And what are they doing? They're trying to say, you know what, we're just going to fine you. And I've got news for you. We're in the process of sort of developing the beginner's guide to fake news. And we were talking about this a couple of nights ago. We really want people to understand what real fake news is. It is the garbage being spouted, the warmongering happening on television. Right now, all you have to do is turn on your TV set and you're going to get an earload full of fake news, I can promise you. And it's garbage talking about how we should basically go to war with Russia. I've been hearing that all morning long. Baseless accusations. Meanwhile, the Russians and the Turkish, Erdogan and Putin, are actually in talks to do a ceasefire in Syria. And the U.S., if you recall, in 2013, the president was trying to push the war with Syria, the invasion of Syria, and the American people said no. They pushed back against that rogue policy. But it looks like, you know what, if you want some real fake news, all you got to do is turn on your television set to get an earful. Now, speaking of fake news, and I go to the New York Times mainly for laughs. There are a couple of good reporters at the New York Times that I know personally and have interviewed before, but the majority of them have no problem basically being lapdogs for the liberal establishment, the Obama administration. And this specific piece, I couldn't pass it up. I had to bring it to you because there's been a lot of trolling going on from the New York Times. This nuclear option, the New York Times is trolling Christians on the Christian holiday. Now, we would never see this in reverse. And I don't care what you are. I don't care if you're a Muslim, an atheist, a person of Jewish descent, or a Christian. I myself find this very appalling that they are picking and being very prejudicial, in the way that they're writing. And this one particular piece, if you can only imagine, if Muslims had to face the same type of trolling from the New York Times as they celebrate on one of their holiest days, we might see a few attacks in this country. But because they're picking a group that largely gets persecuted, but it goes unnoticed because, you know what, hey, it's the Christian population, they see that as fair game and fair fodder. Now, speaking of Christians, they're not the only ones persecuted in this country, as we know. We've seen our law enforcement officers take a beating this year in the press, largely at the hands of Black Lives Matter. And the Capitol, they often have artists come in and portray paintings and artwork. They do this mainly for high school students. And I've noticed this myself walking in the hallways in the corridor of the Capitol. DC law enforcement, and this was up on the Daily Caller, DC law enforcement, they're demanding the removal of a Capitol painting depicting cops as racist pigs. Now, on this piece, this congressional art competition exhibit, it literally shows police officers as pigs in the face, and they're killing innocent people. I want to just quote this directly from this Democratic Missouri representative named Lacey Clay in a statement. Representative Clay says the painting portrays a colorful landscape of symbolic characters representing social injustice. No, it doesn't. It portrays law enforcement as pigs, not human. That is appalling. It should be removed immediately. This is utter crap. It's garbage. It's hanging up in a hallway, a sovereign place where law enforcement should be respected in this country. But it looks like, you know what? You want to paint him as a pig? We'll just hang it in the Capitol hallway. That's no problem right there. Now, going back to President Obama for a minute, because we spout the truth as best as we can here, and he takes a lot of heat because of his rogue globalist agenda. And I am no exception in that. As a reporter, I find what he's doing to this country particularly repugnant in a lot of ways. And Leanne talked about this on the radio show today, and I just wanted to bring it up again because it is so important. We're seeing the president in his last 20-something days of office. He is ramming through as many refugees, unvetted in some cases, I might add, as many as he can. And we have these states. Nebraska is one of these states, and the resettlement program, because Nebraska has a lot of land and not a lot of populace, and the president is onto that, dropping 502 additional refugees into Nebraska during, and we're already into FY 2017. It began in October. That's how the federal government does it. and significantly higher in Nebraska than it's been during any other part in the year in more than 3 decades since the state has participated in the federal refugee resettlement program. So he is ratcheting it up, folks, as many as he can. Even though President-elect Trump said, look, we don't have any idea. And this is not about racism. This is not about being anti-Muslim. This is about, first of all, protecting the sovereignty of the U.S., protecting our civilization, making sure that Christians aren't being targeted and persecuted. But it's also about safety and national security. We have no idea whom we're allowing into our nation unvetted, coming from places where Islamic radicalism and Islamic terrorism is growing rapidly on the ground. We had a hand in destabilizing Syria, and I have a heavy heart when it comes to that. Because we had no business what the hell we were doing there. We wanted to destabilize that population, but now that we had a hand in that, namely arming rebels on the ground, we've seen this collapse, and we're forced to take in a disenfranchised population, and it's much to our demise. Let me just say that. So going back to Trump for a minute and those policies and moving on really quickly, we're running out of time. A story also coming up in The Hill. And I don't know if you guys have watched Chuck Todd at all. He's like the everyman, if you will. He looks unassuming, not an attractive man, not a well-spoken man, so he gets away with a lot because he flies under the radar, in my opinion. He actually weighed in on President Trump and the ego on this guy. This article, he said, I've interviewed Trump multiple times on Meet the Press, and the amount of times he spends after the interview watching the interview with the sound off. He wants people to know that Trump is watching himself. He's trying to shame Trump. He will watch the whole thing on mute. He thinks this way, and look, it's important insight into just understanding him. He's trying to shed some light on Trump's character by saying that he watches himself with the sound off. Buddy, who gives a flying piece of crap if he watches himself with the sound off? I'm sure you have spent countless decades watching yourself with the sound on and off. And sometimes, and I know this is a reporter, and I have one of those voices. I know it sounds like a girl. I got a girl's voice, and it's hard to really, sometimes you watch yourself with the sound off just to make sure that everything is looking right. If you can. And it's hard to stand the sound of your own voice sometimes. So I kind of get that. I don't know why he feels the need to give us some insight into Trump's character. That's not indicative of his character, Mr. Todd. Well, it's been a very busy week for the United States State Department. John Kerry saying we had nothing to do with that UN resolution that declared the settlements, the Israeli settlements, illegal. He went on to say that Israel cannot be Jewish and democratic. I want to take you back to this article that I found in The Hill, and talking about Obama and how he's permanently banned. He's doing these bans and these resolutions. He's also talking in depth. He's allowing the UN Security Council to condemn Israel. So even though John Kerry is saying we had nothing to do with it, we weren't behind it, he's still allowing the United Nations to go after Israel and to slap them. And I'm of the belief that we have no business in ordering Israel around at all, regardless of how you feel about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, regardless of how you feel about the measures that they're taking or whose land belongs to whom. We have no business condemning them and letting the international body do so while we stand behind it and pretend like we're not standing behind it. Now, speaking of Israel, because I'm also of the belief that our President Obama, he is propping up the imams of Iran and he's condemning Israel. And that's a very dangerous thing. I want to leave you guys with this tally of Iran's sanctions relief. If you remember, he lifted the sanctions. It includes more than $10 billion in cash and gold. That's right. Large shipments tied to nuclear negotiations would make it harder to track what Tehran does with its money. But this, in fact, is the case that because of Washington, because of this president, Iran sanctions lifted $10 billion in cash and gold. Hey, guess what? We still don't have a check and balance on what they're doing with their nuclear program.
Our fellow info warriors across the United States and across the planet really love the Hillary for Prison 2016 shirts that we began to put out in 2015. It became a global meme against globalism and corruption, and a very strong maxim that's now being continued on today. Now, President-elect Trump has come out and said it's not his job as president to call for prosecution. He's not supposed to. But that obviously Jeff Sessions, as new attorney general, if he's confirmed, will certainly carry out his duties. But Roger Stone a few weeks ago, right after the election, said, Alex, you got to bring Hillary for prison back. And I said, yeah, but it's a limited edition. It's over. She's been defeated so far. And he said, what about Hillary for Prison 2017? We need those at the inauguration. They're trying to intimidate Trump supporters and nationalists everywhere. That shirt is powerful. It's not just a shirt supporting Trump, like your shirt that says Trump is my president, which we put out before he won, predicting it. putting our name, our guts on the line, but something exposing who the other team was pushing so that people don't forget and so that the push for justice continues. So it's a great way to support the broadcast. It's a great way to have another historic shirt to spread the word and to meet like-minded people of every race, color, and creed who bleed red blood and want justice. It's available. It's another limited run. I don't know how long we're going to offer it, but definitely only a few months. It is Hillary for Prison 2017, and here's the biggest and best part I almost forgot. This shirt arrived in an 18-wheeler, printed right here in the USA a week ago, and I forgot. I've been so busy to even talk about the fact it's been in the store. That on the back of the shirt is a design that I worked on with some of our great graphics people that is George Soros as a goblin. I made a goblin joke a year ago about Trump, saying you better not, actually get in bed with the goblins if he has to work with politicians. But I understand if he has to actually, get knee-deep in their political guts, but you just can't get caught in bed with a goblin. So we now have George Soros, because the media attacked me on this whole goblin meme. They've made huge jokes about it, but it's totally blown up in their face. We now have George Soros as a goblin on the back, and it says with a cross through him, an X like Ghostbusters, no Soros, him as a goblin. It says deport Soros on the bottom, and on the top it says InfoWars established 1996. So it is a limited edition, deport Soros on the back, Hillary for Prison on the front, right-hand shoulder, Infowars.com. It's powerful. You get out to everybody you know, InfoWarsStore.com, or call 888-253-3139. So to all the fellow liberty lovers around the world, I salute you and thank you for your support. This shirt is a celebration of the fight and the victory we've seen in 2016 against tyranny, but looking forward for justice against George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and their entire criminal network. And don't forget our new motto, no more pizza parties.
Well, President Obama, he's had quite a day, hasn't he? He's decided to commit an ultimate provocation against Russia, sanctioning them, throwing 35 of their diplomats out of the country. We saw WWIII Medvedev and his staff take to the Russian embassy in the UK, basically calling him a lame duck. It looks like Putin has responded himself, calling this, quote, kitchen diplomacy. I can't make this up. I found this on Vox, and it talks about how President Obama, he's taking these unprecedented steps to punish Russia for these cyber attacks we're seeing. Now, of course, U.S. intel agencies, they believe, and a couple of them, it's my belief that there are only a few rogue agents, this past year that Russia has mounted this attack on the integrity of the American electoral process. So what are we going to do? We're going to begin sanctioning and targeting like we've never targeted before, including throwing 35 of their people out of the country. Now, of course, Putin has responded to this, and he's saying, look, just because you expel our people doesn't mean we're going to expel your people. He responds, he says, look, we're not expelling anyone from Russia. We're just going to hold tight here, and we refuse to sink to your kitchen diplomacy. Now, I had to ask, what was kitchen diplomacy? I hadn't heard that expression before, and Daria, one of our lovely, we can't do without kind of people around here, explained to me that it's like a man and a wife bickering in the kitchen. So Russia's saying they're not going to stoop to that level. Thank God for that they're going to hold tight. We have an article that's up on our website written by Steve Watson, and it talks about how Trump and Reince Priebus is saying we don't want World War anywhere. Trump, he gave a statement from West Palm Beach about the Russian hacking, and he said, look, who knows what really happened? We don't have any idea. They're not releasing any information, and in this computer age, there's a lot of really muffled things, but here's what we do know. We're not interested in going to war all over the place. That's what we do know. And of course, he addresses the fact that Obama is sanctioning Russia, and the administration, it's spending its last hours, its last few precious hours in office trying to kick Russia in the teeth on the way out, if you can believe this. Now, we saw this in 2015 in mass, where they were sanctioning, we were forcing our Western allies, France, for example, not to build those Mistral-class warships they'd agreed to build for Russia. We were pressuring the West, the UK specifically, to make sure that Russian diplomats